All right, let's kick this off. Greg, do we have a lot of people in the waiting room, or are we good? Okay. So welcome. Hi all. I hope, well, we hope you're doing well, and it's really good to see everybody today. Please mute yourself if you are not speaking. This is the second webinar of the Museum Publishing Digital Interest Group, or MUPU-DIG. We're thrilled to welcome you all. As a reminder, we'll have a couple of opportunities for Q&A throughout when you'll have a chance to talk, but when you're not talking, please mute yourself. While you're settling in, it would be great if you could use the chat window to introduce yourself. I'm sure we'll all be interested to get a sense of who is on the call later. If you missed our January call, we have uploaded a video with the slides to YouTube. We sent it out to our list host, and we're putting a link in the chat window. I think Katie has that. If you didn't receive our emails, we'll also be recording today's session. So if you haven't signed up to receive our emails yet and you'd like to get those in the future, we'll also post a link to the sign up in our chat window. Today we have presentations from Dr. Lara Yeager-Crasselt, who's the curator, and Caroline von Cauwenberge, the Curatorial Associate and Digital Content Coordinator at the Leiden Collection, and John McGlone, the front-end developer, UI designer, and accessibility specialist at Michigan Publishing. Just a note on the structure of our webinar today, we will have two presentations of about 15 minutes each, with some time for questions after each presentation. Katie is going to be monitoring our Q&A today, so please type questions into the chat window and we'll try to get them into our discussion. You'll also have a chance to ask questions directly at that point. So without too much further ado, I'm going to hand this off to Dr. Lara Yeager-Crasselt and Caroline von Cauwenberge. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much. Really happy to be here today. Thank you for having us, and nice to see so many of you. Caroline and I had hoped to be in the same room, but alas, we are not. So Caroline is going to be sharing her screen, as she's just done, for our presentation today. So we're really pleased to be able to present the Leiden Collection Catalogue, which is the online scholarly catalog of a private collection of 17th century Dutch art, which is based in New York. And we'd like to focus particularly on two themes today: accessibility and sustainability. And we'll look at these from a rather unconventional perspective, in the sense that as a private collection that does not have its own permanent gallery space and therefore operates outside of a traditional institutional framework, we have a unique set of opportunities and also challenges in how we present the collection and its scholarship. And you'll see now on the screen, this is the homepage of the Leiden Collection Catalogue. And at the same time, I think we face both conceptually and practically in the ways that we navigate the presentation of a digital catalog, many of the same issues that you face and our museum colleagues. And so we'd like to show you today what we've done in the past 3 years since the catalog first launched in 2017, and how we've tackled certain issues about accessibility and sustainability, and have really continued to learn and grow while maintaining our focus on being a dynamic digital platform for scholarship and various digital technologies. So I'd just like to say very briefly a few words about the Leiden Collection, because that's important in understanding who we are and what we do. The collection was founded by Thomas Kaplan and his wife, Daphne Ricconati Kaplan, in 2003. So this is really very much still a relatively young collection. And today it is among the largest private collections of Dutch art in the world. It includes around 250 works, predominantly paintings, just a handful of works on paper, as you see here. So you're looking at the main page of the collection catalog, which is a collection overview. And you can see the arrows on either side here that enable you to explore and browse through the collection, ultimately, as you'll see later, taking us to the various components. The collection focuses on the Dutch city of Leiden. So there's a very focused and distinctive character in Rembrandt and his early works in Leiden and his move to Amsterdam, and also the work of the Leiden fine painters or feinschilders. So it's a collection of great depth and also breadth in certain ways. And so we'll, again, explore that as we go through. So in terms of making the Leiden collection accessible, this is a particularly relevant task for us because we do not have a permanent gallery space. And so making the collection accessible has been crucial since its beginnings. And the collectors never had the intention to live with their art. They've never lived with a single piece, but instead conceived of the Leiden collection as a lending library. So this means, on the one hand, making the collection accessible, whether through loans, long-term loans to permanent collections of various institutions, National Gallery, Getty, etc. They've been there for quite some time through these various years, but also special loans to exhibitions. And most recently, in the past 2.5 years, the collection has been on a global exhibition tour. And you can see on the left-hand side of the screen here, just a shot of the menu, that part of the online collection catalog is also showing where you can physically see the works in the collection. So currently on view is a new feature that we've added, so that right away you can see where in the world works in the Leiden collection are accessible right now, and then the list there of our past exhibitions, and that would take you to individual pages on each of these shows. But essentially, really the core, I think, of the character and mission of the collection is its online catalog. And here again, you can see now on the left, really a kind of table of contents, an overview of the various components of the catalog. And the three main components, really the pillars of the catalog, I'd say, are the artwork entries, artist biographies, and thematic essays. So right now, the catalog is co-edited by myself and Arthur Wheelock, but it has been written with the contributions of over 30 scholars, leading scholars in the field. So it truly represents a collaboration, and this is a model that is continuing as we speak in terms of contributions for new entries and biographies and also essays. So the catalog enables the collection to really be seen and experienced and explored by diverse audiences and in various ways. As a digital publication, the catalog serves a very broad public, from those simply interested, art enthusiasts, casual browsers, but also it is a serious scholarly publication and is meant to be used by fellow scholars, museum professionals, students, and teachers. So it does this in a number of different ways, and Caroline's going to lead us through the catalog in a moment. But I just want to present you with a kind of timeline of our development very briefly. So the catalog launched in January of 2017. And at that point, the traveling exhibition of the collection was just about to begin. So we had decided that spring to launch an exhibition site. And since this had come somewhat after the catalog had been in progress, the exhibition site existed in parallel to, but really separate from, the online catalog itself. So by summer 2018, we were able to unify these two sites into something very much what you see today, which is more representative of all of the activities of the collection, loans, exhibitions, and scholarship. In the course of 2018, 2019, we've added 7 new entries, a new artist biography, just recently a new essay, as well as smaller elements. And so we were faced with the question, how do we showcase that we have new content? And so we realized we didn't have a way to announce that very easily to return visitors of our site. And so about 6 months ago, we began to really rethink, how can we redesign the homepage in such a way as to introduce these new elements? So at the beginning of this month, we just relaunched, I suppose, the redesign. And the main aim of that is to be able to highlight the fact that the online catalog is a dynamic resource and it's not a static publication by any means. So as we add new content to the catalog, we have a rotating banner now, which showcases new entries, essays, but also new loans and ways in which the collection can be seen or where it can be seen. And we hope that users also, when they are returning to the site, will know that's where they can go to see what's available and check out what is happening with the Leiden collection. And for us, that's an important element in the discussion of sustainability, because we really aim to stay current with the scholarship on the one hand, but also current with technology on the other, and to be able to adapt as necessary and balance the needs of the catalog with the other activities and responsibilities of the collection. And so I think without further ado then, Caroline will take us to the catalog.
Thank you, Lara. So I'm going to show you a couple of pages in our online catalog to give you an idea of which tools and features we use to serve a broad audience. Here you can see our new homepage, and this is our new moving news banner, which was very important for this redesign. But the clarity of layout and the ease of navigation was also important for us. And you can see that we use a lot of images, not only in the news banner, but also in these other sections of the homepage to make our website more attractive, but also interactive. As a visitor, you have several options of getting into the content of the online catalog, driven by these images and also by your own interests. So here we are going to our most recently published essay. The Leiden Collection's online catalog uses many technological tools to enhance the user experience. We really try to take advantage of the digital format and push beyond what printed publications can offer. For those who prefer a hard copy environment, it's very easy to print and download a PDF version of every piece of content in our online catalog. And these current versions, but also earlier PDF versions, are saved in the online catalog's archive. Now I'm going to show you a couple of tools that we use to enhance user navigation. One of them are these embedded footnotes, so readers do not have to scroll down and then back up to read the footnotes, but these are embedded within the text. Working in a similar way are the embedded references to comparative figures. And another neat tool is our integrated glossaries. So readers do not have to leave this page to go to our glossary page or Google these terms, but when hovering over glossary terms, the definition is provided in this little pop-up window. We've tried to connect all the relevant artwork entries, artist biographies, and essays using hyperlinks. This way, an interested reader can always discover more information and keep reading. So now we're going to go to this artwork entry page. This artwork is discussed in that essay, but when a reader is more interested, they can easily go to this page to discover more information. Here you can see our horizontal tab interface, which we use to provide extended information, for example, the provenance. So this information is easily accessible for readers who are interested in seeing the exhibition history, for example, but it also prevents content overload for users who just want to read the entry or want to look at comparative figures. In addition to making all the research on our paintings accessible, we always try to make technical images of our paintings accessible. So here we have the X-ray of this work online and also the infrared reflectography image. And again, in trying to take advantage of what's possible with a digital publication, you can see here our Leiden Viewer. The Leiden Viewer is a very highly valued feature of our online catalog. The tool can be used to look at images, but also scholars and researchers can use the Leiden Viewer to analyze artworks by using the incredible deep zoom function, and also by layering these technical images and making comparisons in different viewing modes. Our Leiden Viewer implements a IIIF technology. Using this technology, our images can easily be compared with artworks from other institutions that are part of the IIIF. initiative, for example, the National Gallery and the Getty, among many other museums. We're very proud of our Leiden Viewer, and we think it's an extremely useful tool for scholars. But in developing these technical and digital tools, you have to keep in mind that technical errors can always occur. So it's a challenge to make sure an online catalog is working as it should be. For example, last week there was a IIIF hosting service outage, so we had to reach out to the developer of our IIIF hosting server because our Leiden Viewer wasn't loading any images. This problem was fixed, I think, within 30 minutes, but it's just an example of how things can be working perfectly one minute and be or seem completely broken the next. So I hope that this short tour in the Leiden Collection online catalog has shown you different technological tools that are possible and that benefit users of different interests. Unfortunately, I do not have time to show you some of our other features, such as the video content, full bibliography, and our more recent appendix section. The appendix section can be added to every entry, essay, and biography if necessary. And so far we have used it to make an archival document accessible. So that's pretty cool as well. But now we can go to the final part of our presentation on sustainability.
Thanks, Caroline. So producing a digital catalog, as many of you are very familiar with, is a time and resource intensive activity. And the time and the effort and the cost of maintaining it should not be underestimated by any means. For the Leiden Collection, at the moment, about 70% of the collection has been digitized or is included in the catalog. And we're still in the process of expanding it in all sorts of ways with new entries of new acquisitions of works which are in the collection, haven't yet been added, biographies, etc. In addition, all of the references, exhibitions related to works in the collection are regularly updated, while published entries, if there's a substantial change to the content, those are also revised and then re-archived. So I think this raises one of the key challenges of keeping up with a digital publication of this nature is how do you keep it sustainable, both in terms of content and scholarship and technology. And it's also a matter of having the time and the manpower and the resources in order to be able to do that. As a private collection, without a larger institutional framework around us, we find ourselves in a position of being very flexible and adaptable. This gives us, in some cases, more opportunities, but again, also some challenges in how we work as a team, and the larger team we also have to rely on.
When publishing an online catalog, you also have to consider that digital technology is changing rapidly and that the catalog will have to be redesigned over time because taste, aesthetics, and conventions change too. The production and maintenance of our online catalog is a very collaborative process within our team, but also outside our institution. For example, in developing new features or maintaining the catalog's technology, we have to depend on our web developers who have the knowledge and the skills to implement the changes we want to make.
And in a brief conclusion here, we want to end with our gallery view, which is another way to explore the collection and the catalog. And I think in general, for the Leiden Collection, the online catalog has given us almost endless possibilities for sharing the collection, sharing the knowledge about the collection, but in some ways, as we see here, interacting with it in unconventional ways. This is a key element of the catalog of how you can look at the larger collection view we first showed you, but also a gallery view, which is not a replacement by any means for seeing the works in person, but it allows visitors to understand the works in relation to one another in terms of size and scale. And I think this virtual experience is something that is only possible through the benefits of digital technology. And it really underlies for us how we continue to be creative and thoughtful in considering accessibility for our collection and the new ways and the many ways that you can sustain that approach. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both. I think I'll turn it over to Katie, who's moderating the Q&A now, but amazing looking catalog.
Thank you.
Yeah, there was one question that came in that was seconded by someone that was about peer review and whether it is peer reviewed and how that might be indicated, if so, to your readers.
So this is the peer review process for us happens not always in the traditional way of a journal, that we don't have a sort of a set team of peer reviewers, but the catalog is shared with outside scholars based on their specialty for their input. And as I said, now since I came on as curator in 2017, now I've joined Arthur Wheelock as we're serving as co-editors of the catalog. And then we do very much, because it's such a collaborative process and we have so many outside scholars who contribute to the catalog, it's a more fluid process of peer review. But yes, that is something that is definitely important to what we do and how we do it.
Sorry, trying to unmute myself. I had a question about the, because I love it, your image viewer, which is great. And I know that, you know, IIIF is an open source sort of development community. Is that something that you guys sort of built within a sort of existing one? Is that something that's available for other people, like through GitHub or whatever, to draw upon, or is that something that's exclusive to your publication?
Caroline, go ahead.
Yes, so we worked with a developer to make our Leiden viewer, but unfortunately, it's no longer available for other people to use it. So it used to be, but now it's just for the Leiden Collections online catalog. But yeah, we developed it together with a web developer, because we don't have the skills, of course, ourselves to do that. Yeah.
Well, there was also a question about, or a couple of comments about the gallery view that you showed that had the works and how important that was for giving a sense of the works in scale. And there was a question about if the frames were original.
Great question. In some cases, so every work that enters the collection is framed in a replica period 17th century frame, unless there's a few rare instances where we do have either a 17th or 18th century frame. And so those works are either photographed, framed, and then those end up on the website, or alternatively, sometimes there's a little magic behind the scenes to make that happen.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a question from Mike, I'm not sure of how you get the gallery view. Mike, maybe if you could turn yourself on to ask, is that a question about how to access it through the website?
Yeah, I was just wanting to know how you view the gallery view, because I missed the part where she clicked on a button. Or
I can maybe share my screen again and show it on our website, how you can access it.
Yeah, that's, as Caroline shows you, there's different filters and different view functionalities that you can select when you're on the collection view.
So, for example, if you go back to the home page, collection, if you click on artworks, you go to this artwork view, but you can also see it as a gallery. So this is how it works.
I think we have time for one more question, which I'll take my question, which Lauren seconded, which was, I was just curious about, you talked a lot at the beginning about explicitly, that you have very explicit objectives for access, and that you were trying to, as part of the redesign, surface some things to the audience in terms of the new scholarship. Do you have metrics that you've identified for, for the website, for the number of people who you hope are visiting it, for people who are downloading are citing different parts of it for PDF downloads or anything like that that you guys are sort of aiming for to kind of see if you feel like, you know, what would success in terms of access look like for you guys?
We're currently not analyzing the analytics on our site. That has been done in the past, but we've been thinking about it more now, and it's a great quarantine project actually to dive into that. So,
but I should add too that we have, in the first few years of the catalog being launched, we had certain intervals where we did I think it was every 3 months, or maybe in the first year, and maybe even the first year and a half. So we had those original metrics, and it was continued during our exhibition tour. And of course, at those moments when we were opening exhibitions very regularly, we did see a huge spike in traffic to the site. And so I think for us now, with the redesign and focusing very much on this continuing rolling publication of new content, that's important, and that's one of our kind of priorities in the next couple of months to establish that on a more regular basis, so we know. But what is success? That people are there and exploring. I don't have a specific, number in mind.
I thought about it, but it's hard to track the success of an online catalog. We thought about like the number of pages they visit, users visit, how long they stay on certain pages. Those are things we want to track in the future, and also the number of returning visitors, because it's important for us that people come back to our online catalog, because we add new content very often. So it's important for us to track the returning users.
All right, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Now we'll turn it over to John from Michigan Publishing. Hey, John.
Hey. Okay. Let me get my timer going. All right. Hi, everyone. Really excited to be here and connecting with the museum community. Today, I'm going to switch gears in terms of access and talk about web accessibility. And specifically, I'm sharing with you how the University of Michigan Press and Michigan Publishing has approached making accessible digital publications, from the high-level policy decisions that we've made to more detailed aspects of how you might produce an accessible digital publication. So perhaps now more than ever, with access to physical books restricted, making accessible digital publications is urgent, so that we can ensure that we are providing equitable access to digital content that we produce. So I'm really excited to be here today and talk about web accessibility and its application to digital publishing. So my colleague, Jillian Downey, I want to give a shout out to her. She's not joining us today. She's busy keeping things running, but she was going to present with me, and she's had a couple decades of experience in book publishing with the University of Michigan Press, and contributed to a portion of these slides. So we both I work at Michigan Publishing, and University of Michigan Press is a part of Michigan Publishing. In terms of who we are and what we do about 100 titles a year in social sciences, humanities, political science, disability studies, anthropology or archaeology. But we also do digital journals, and from one form or another, we've been doing digital publishing since the early 2000s. So not museum-based publishing, but a form of, definitely some overlaps in the types of content that we produce. So looking at what we're going to talk about today, I wanted to just give I'm not sure how familiar people are with web accessibility standards and how they might be applied to publishing. So I want to give some background there, and then get into some more detailed aspects of what we do to make born accessible books, and thinking about strategies we have, components of the publications, and trying to illustrate it with real world examples where we can. So let's think about accessibility standards here for a minute. So accessible for who? A lot of times we just think about visually impaired or print disabled users, but there really are 4 categories of accessibility groups that we try and make our digital publications accessible for. So the visual non-sighted users could be users with low vision, obstructed vision, or just your aging parents. Obviously, there's also a group of people who have auditory or hard of hearing issues. And so, you know, while the web is a visual medium, if you have auditory, you know, sound necessary media, then you need to be considering captions and other fallbacks for these types of users. And one less thought about group are those with motor impairments. So they use a wide range of assistive technology. They might use just their keyboard. They may use a technology that's like an eye tracker, or a one single button that routes and navigates a computer. So we need to make sure our sites are working with, are optimized to work with a range of assistive technologies. And then also cognitive disability users as well. So relating to the ease of processing information, this could be someone with dyslexia or autism or Down syndrome, for example. And then there might be people with temporary disabilities like an arm or wrist injury that gives them a motor impairment that may make it hard for them to use a keyboard or type. So accessibility standards, they help ensure that we address these 4 groups to provide equitable experiences for them on the web. I've listed here the web content accessibility guideline standard, which applies to websites, and there are 3 different levels. The more letters there, the more difficult or the more complex of criteria that you need to apply to your website. But if you're also making ebooks like in EPUB or PDF format, there are accessibility standards you should be aware of that address specific issues with that type of content. Really, I would say the WCAG, Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, are what you would focus on and get to know if you were to choose one from here, because they inform a lot of the accessibility criteria for PDF and EPUBs. If you don't want to memorize WCAG criteria, and who does, I would highly recommend adopting a set of guidelines for your digital publications. They're much easier to understand. There's a lot of them out there. 2 that I really like are Vox Media provides a accessibility guidelines for their products, which is very nice. And then there's the Accessibility Project. And these include things like checklists, resources, code patterns, things that you can use while you're building your digital publications to ensure you're meeting various criteria in WCAG. So that's very brief. I only have 15 minutes and I have a lot I want to cover. So let's look at some best practices for making born digital publications, born accessible publications, and particularly starting to look at workflows. So the story behind University of Michigan Press, we were publicly outed as having issues, accessibility issues with some of our ebooks. And we did an audit and found that the largest gap was that we lacked image descriptions for our ebooks. So we've focused largely on the work we've done on optimizing our workflow to get quality image descriptions. So we could have said, we will write all descriptions in-house, or we'll have a vendor write descriptions for us, but we want image description to be an integral part of a bookmaking process, so much so that it would just become another part of what goes into making a great book. So description, like the rest of the text, it needs to be in line with the standards of scholarly writing. So we need to work with the scholars who are authoring the content to make sure as much as, that scholarly attention is paid to the descriptions as well. So all that to say is, high quality image description really starts with an author, and it starts early. So as soon as a manuscript enters a workflow, it's getting identified, if it has images or video or audio, it's getting flagged for accessibility, which sparks a conversation with the author, and we are providing resources and support for that author in partnership with the editor and the editorial assistant. And so then the author would then submit the manuscript plus, all their image files or video files, and then a document of the captions, the traditional captions, and image description, copy edited. And, hold on a second. Some things just to sort of plan on from if you implement such a workflow is, you will probably do some of this work in-house, or you may do it with vendors. Obviously not all authors are equipped to do this, and you need to plan the time into and the expense into both copy edit and to review the descriptions they provide and make sure they're quality. So, obviously not all authors are aware of what alt text is and need lots and lots of guidance on what makes good alternative text or image description. What we've done is added it into our author guide to include requirements for alt text, and along with links to resources. And one particular resource that I wanted to draw your attention to is the Describing Visual Resources Toolkit. We, learned that over time, describing images for an equitable experience is not always easy, especially for authors who are new to it. And so there's a lot of resources out there for describing images in the sciences and in math and social sciences, but we found that image description for the humanities is much, much more complex. And how do you effectively describe a painting and remain objective? How do you describe a portrait photograph, a sculpture? So with funding from the Crest Foundation and our accessibility specialists at the University of Michigan Library, Stephanie Rosen, we got a group of leaders in museum publishing and web accessibility, scholarly publishing, and disability scholars together to have a workshop and talk about image description. And the result of that workshop was the creation of this toolkit. So I think this is really applicable to this museum field and designed for exactly this community. So I really want to draw your attention to that today. So let's look at some things that make accessible publications accessible. Starting with content, we'll later talk about navigation and design. So if you haven't thought about image description and how it plays into an accessible book, this diagram sort of breaks it apart and helps you understand all the different elements that go into it. So you have visible elements that everyone can see, and also reading technology can assistive technology can access. So the typical body text, a caption, but then you have hidden elements, alternative text, and long description that is only, in many cases, it doesn't, but is accessible only to assistive technologies. So alt text is that shorter description, often 140 characters or fewer, and it's associated with this particular image. It should never repeat the caption. It should offer, a short, succinct summary of that image. If a longer description is needed, say, for example, the body of the text doesn't actually describe that image in more detail, then providing a long description can help basically create a more equitable experience, so that someone who might be visually impaired would be able to get a full understanding of the image being included and why it was included in the text. This is an example with some markup of an image using long description. And so it is, you see here, the alt text, and then the reference to the longer description. So this is an image of a towering billboard. Text on the billboard appears composed of words and letters cut out from a variety of different print sources and pasted together. The text reads, 12 million kids are held hostage by a psychiatric disorder. So it's different, you know, it differs from the caption and the whole idea and what is said in the alt text. And the whole idea here is to sort of supplement and provide a full sort of experience for someone who might be visually impaired. Tables. You probably have tables, and sometimes you might end up using images. Don't do that. It's not accessible. So always try and use HTML tables instead of images, and to provide headers for your data tables when you do so, so that someone can identify. A screen reader could say, you know, as it's going through this column here, the country column, that it will identify that this is part of the country column, and not just start reading off countries and not really understanding where, you know, the context of the table itself. I've included, since we're, you know, short on time, this link here at the bottom of the slide is a great link on diving into everything about data tables and making them accessible, and includes ways of how you might implement those in your publications. So if you have audio and video resources, you really need to make sure you're including alternative ways to access that, that media. One way is to provide captions, but you also need to include audio description. So this would be someone who's visually impaired, so actual description of what's occurring in the video. One thing you will also just, you know, want to think about if you include multimedia is there's a considerable amount of effort to make them accessible. Captioning and those sorts of things can be quite expensive, and getting them accurate captions is something that from vendors, is something that we've struggled with in Michigan Publishing. Same idea for audio transcripts. I'm just going to skip forward here to other things to think about. Encoding language shifts. So we publish a lot of books that have multiple languages in them, and you want to identify language shifts in text, so that assistive technology can essentially follow the change in the language and speak or translate the text in the appropriate accent with the proper pronunciation. And this is also time-consuming work to do, so we choose to do it on particular titles where we know. So for example, this example here is from a title about blind scholars in ancient China, and so we know that this is going to be a book of interest to the blind community and to the disability studies community. So we're selecting here to identify the transliterated Japanese, so that it's pronounced correctly by assistive technology. Navigation. This is really important as we think about a lot of their publications are long form, and so people who can't see it need to be able to find ways to get through the text and find information and navigate that information. So one thing to think about is a logical reading order. Sighted readers don't typically think about the logical reading order within a chapter of a book, because they can visually identify secondary content and read around it as desired. But a reading system or assistive technology doesn't have this information to use this for the same effect unless you add it or adjust how the content is laid out in the digital version. So think of a machine reading through the book, moving left to right on a page, and consider this image here on the left. This is the layout of a printed version of the book. On its previous page, in mid-paragraph, the machine would have stopped reading the paragraph and then gone on to the next page that you see here and start reading the first section, then the image description, then jump back into the paragraph, and not what was intended. So when you're designing for digital layout, you don't want to interrupt the flow of the paragraph, and try and place captions in a logical place. So in the ebook version on the right, the image is placed after the paragraph so as not to interrupt the reading flow. So more complex book layouts might, have call-out boxes or sidebars, and if you're not carefully thinking out and marking them up with the correct HTML elements, it can cause issues with screen readers. So content structure is one of the most important aspects of web accessibility. In certain studies, upwards of 70% of screen reader users, that one of the first things they do when going through long form content is to navigate headings when they're looking for information. So if you really need to ensure that you're marking up your content with semantic headings and a document structure to assist device users to navigate the content quickly. In this example, I've sort of drawn out the H1 headings, the H2, H3, and then you can see how they nest, underneath each other. And so someone would using assistive technology might print out a document outline of just the headings. And so you want to make sure you're semantically encoding your heads, and so that these appear in their document outline when they're printed out into assistive technology. So if you're dealing with, I'm skipped over that other one. If you're dealing with print and ebook combinations, it's always a good idea to add page markers from the print book into the text of the digital publication. This, obviously helps sighted users, but for other assistive technology users, it can help with lookup purposes, looking up citations or making citations themselves. So when you're designing, one of the biggest things you'll want to consider for color blindness and low vision is color and contrast. And you want to ensure that the foreground and background colors of your publication, especially the background page and the text, have sufficient contrast so it's more readable for everyone. This example that I'm showing here, we see the contrast ratio, it's failing WCAG, and so you would want to make the foreground color much darker so that it had a 4.5 to 1 contrast ratio. So there's some tools here. WebAIM that's what this screenshot is from, as a contrast checker you can use, where you type in the foreground and background color and it will give you the contrast ratio. And then this other tool is a palette builder, and you can essentially choose all the color palette of your website, and it will give you let you know what the contrast ratios are and give you suggestions and combinations for how to combine the colors in your palette to achieve good contrast ratio. Another important thing to consider in design, don't indicate important information with color. So in this example, this is a London Underground map, all indicated, with color of what line, right? And so for someone who might be colorblind or seeing it in a different context, they wouldn't obviously be able to comprehend if people are referring to the purple line or the orange line. And so we just want to be aware that, we need to make this information available to all users, including those who are colorblind. Other things to think about: test your publications. So there's accessibility checker for EPUBs that I've included here, a couple website checkers. I really like the Axe tool. You can run through your website. And then, you know, I would really recommend just getting familiar with your keyboard. And this link to Nielsen Norman Group's article on testing a website with a keyboard is really great if you haven't thought about that before. But a lot of people are keyboard-only users, and that article will sort of walk you through how you can test your own websites and digital publications using a keyboard only. And if you're really feeling bold or just want to experience what it's like for someone who uses assistive technology, might be low vision, I would point you to using NVDA, a free open source screen reader with Firefox, or if you use a Mac, it's already there for you, and it's called VoiceOver, and use that with Safari, and learn how broken a lot of the web is. We want to make it better. And then finally, you know, if you can't, you know, we in our field deal with a lot of complex visual presentations, right? At the Michigan Publishing, we have books with 3D models, with interactive maps, and things that are very, very difficult and time consuming to make accessible. So if you can't make it, if it can't be made accessible, think about another route to get users to that information. With a particular project that was for an archaeological dig, there was a 3D model that had a lot of data in it. So we created an accessibility mode that basically replaced the 3D model with links to database records containing pretty much the same information. So think about alternate routes and other ways you can get information to people when a resource or part of a digital publication can't be made accessible. So I think I went over, but that's what I have, and you know, happy to take questions, and hopefully slides will be shared because there's lots of links in them for you to dig into more info. Thanks.
Awesome, thanks, John. Yeah, there are a whole bunch of questions in the chat that are mostly around people asking, you know, for some links to some of the stuff that you have embedded in your slides. So we'll make sure that that's available to everyone after. And there were also a couple of questions just about the degree to which you have implemented this throughout your list. I know that you mentioned that you kind of started this with a lot of the books that were kind of on your accessibility studies list, and it was, you know, when it was pointed out that's like you're writing books on these things, so yeah. you should walk the walk.
Yes.
But then, you know, how much of this is sort of like just embedded in your practice for every publication, or how much do you kind of have a conversation going into any given book, like, we have the resources to do this here or not?
So now we're at a point where all our books are getting image descriptions from authors. And so that started in 2019. And probably about halfway through, we were getting, every author is providing image descriptions. There was a time, a year or so, where some were and some weren't, and when authors were not, we were having vendors do image description for us. And previous to that, like you mentioned, we started with only one book series, which only did 8 titles a year. So it was a way to work out the workflow and the kinks and figure out what resources we needed to create or find to share with authors. And so like that's sort of how the Describing Visual Resources Toolkit emerged. It was pretty early on. We had a book in a disability studies, a disability studies title that just had, it was talking about disability represented in art, and was just really, really hard. The author was having a hard time describing the images. So that's sort of where that all started.
Thank you. I know that I just want to be sensitive to our time because it looks like we're at about 3 minutes before the hour. And Lauren, I know you had a couple of sort of housekeeping things for us to close out on.
Yeah, so thank you everybody for presenting today. Those were both really informative, and it's really awesome to see what you guys are doing and how you're using these different tools in your list. So thank you. We, as I said before, we are recording today. So we will be sending out a YouTube link to this recording. We will include links in that YouTube recording, and we will also send out links and presentations when we email our list host. So that's a plug for the list host. If you're not signed up, please do so. We put the link in the chat before, maybe we'll put it there again. Our next webinar is scheduled for May 19th. We are always looking for questions and ideas and projects that you think are interesting to share with this community. So please put those in the chat, but you can also email us at mupudigital, M-U-P-U digital, @gmail.com. And we are monitoring that email address. I think that's all that we have for today. I'm so happy that to see you guys. I hope everybody is doing well through this quarantine time, but we're happy to be able to keep these conversations going on digital publishing, and we hope to see you on May 19th. This is from Katie at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, Greg from the Getty, and Emily from the National Gallery. The four of us will keep this going. So I don't know if you guys have anything else, but I think that's it for us today.
Thanks to all of our fantastic speakers. We really appreciate you taking the time and the madness.
Very happy to do so. Thank you.
Yeah, forging ahead. So
Thank you
in there, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.